who was coming to me for lessons, I always recommend that people send their spouses to someone else. That he said, "I love the way you dumb this down," and I thought, well, I'm going to take that as a compliment. But I think what he meant was I sort of simplified it and made it really sort of not too touchy-feely, you could say, and just very straightforward. Yeah. So I think that maybe that comes from working with a lot of guys who really just are wanting to get done with me and get to the guitar. But what I try to tell them is that when you're having trouble on the guitar, it's actually you that's having the trouble. The guitar's fine, so you have to work on you. And yet when I teach teachers, there are many teachers. You're a teacher, and there aren't as many men teachers in our field as women.
Yeah.
So when I teach teachers, mostly I teach women. So that's kind of interesting, the dichotomy.
How has the technique affected your writing?
It made me write. I think that's, it's funny to have one's early training, which for me was writing in college in the 1970s, to have that now catch up with my career that I've been in for, if you count the massage therapy, since 1984. All of a sudden the two things docked up, and I was using this early training to address this work. So it's been an interesting thing to have the writing show up as a strength, which it always sort of has been, but not used so much, and just have this opportunity to write a book and be able to because of my early training in writing. So that's been an interesting thing.
Tell me about your new book.
Well, it's actually, I want to say an attempt, but it's more than that. There was this call in my own thinking to really put the Alexander technique on the mindfulness map, because I see a lot of people training to do mindfulness who've had other careers, which is fabulous, doctors and psychologists and other people, but they haven't given their careers to this kind of work. They're learning it on top of what they did and then teaching it. And I thought, wait a minute, we actually do this. This is all we do. So I felt like not for the Alexander technique not to be represented out there in the mindfulness world seemed kind of to shortchange a whole lot of careers over the course of the past century. So this book is about that. It's called Mind Body 40 Days. It's a day-by-day reading. You get day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way up to day 40, about mind-body education, be it yoga or mindfulness or Alexander technique, kind of the pitfalls and what gets hard about it once we take it on, and how do we apply it to practical tasks, all that kind of thing. But all of it is obviously colored or seen through the lens of the Alexander technique. So there's one series of, I think it's actually 4 days, where we're basically going through the transcript of a lesson that was an actual transcript of an actual lesson. And when I knew I wanted to write this book, I actually had a student show up out of the blue after not seeing him for 4 years and say, I want to take 4 lessons and videotape them. And I said, great, can I have the videotapes? And that became this part of the book. So it really was, it's just putting out the AT as a form of mindfulness, a practice, a personal practice.
What are some of the most interesting reactions you've had to your book?
Actually, so far, everybody who's read it has liked how candid I am about what gets in the way of our work, what is hard about directing the awareness, how much of a full-time job this is, how it's really about our thinking. So I've gotten a lot of wonderful support and responses to, I have a couple entries about, taking on a piece of work where I was really going to do a great job directing my own awareness, and then I go ahead and write how that broke down, in one case into basically a tantrum. Because this is not easy stuff. It's very simple, but it's not easy. It's not easy to maintain it. So I come at that in a pretty straightforward way, rather than just tell people what to do. I also say, yeah, and sometimes we try to do it and we suck at it. And I feel like that's important. It's important that we know that. And then we just begin again, right? And we do some more.
Teachers affected your understanding of...
I'm losing you, Luke. You're going in and out a little bit.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just couldn't hear it. Should we call in again?
The technique.
Should we call
in?
Let's call in again. No. Oh, wait. Now I've got you.
Okay. Is it clear?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. I don't know what happened, but how has your work training teachers affected your understanding and teaching of the technique?
That's a good question. I would say because I did it just for 2 years, although now I still work with some of the same trainees, some of whom have become teachers. The short time that I did it full-time, and then before that I was an assistant on the course, it's put me more in touch with the demands of the ongoingness of the work. I mean, obviously we have to maintain it while we're teaching, but also to watch trainees and to help them in their struggle to build kind of the inner architecture and the stamina to support the work in an ongoing way. It's just given me more respect for that. A, how hard it is. B, how important it is. And C, how thrilling it is when that day after day devotion to the work pays off and you start to be able to keep your back and inhibit and, be a different person. That's pretty thrilling. There was actually a moment I was assisting on the course, so this might have been about 4 years ago, maybe even longer. It could have been 5 years ago. And there was a particular trainee when I began assisting that year who was probably beginning his 3rd year. And he was, sometimes people come to the work when they're older, and he'd had a previous career, and I thought, I don't see it. I'm not really necessarily seeing that this person's going to be a teacher, because they didn't move like a teacher. They moved like a businessman. He moved like a businessman. So one day I was it was maybe 3 or 4 months later. So he was now halfway through his 3rd year. And I was teaching in the room. I was over in one corner of the room giving turns. And Daria, who was running the training, was in her part of the studio giving turns. But over on my left, there was another teacher giving turns. And the training's early in the morning, and I thought, well, that's weird. Maybe somebody else came in today. And I looked over, and there he was. And somehow, in those 3 months, when I wasn't looking, he had turned into a teacher. So I think just that 3-year process that transforms people into teachers, there's a certain quality to a teacher, the ability to sustain the work. And it's thrilling to see it.
What do you see as the biggest challenges facing Alexander teachers at the moment?